Assalamu alaikum viewers. My name is Sakif Azarningwala and as a part of Rehan AI teacher training course, I'm back with another TED Talk review session. And today, the TED Talk that I'm reviewing is titled The Power of Vulnerability by Brené Brown. So let's get started. Uh, Originally, the TED Talk was delivered in TEDx Houston in 2010. The talk explores a surprisingly simple but powerful idea. Vulnerability is not a weakness that we should eliminate from our lives. Instead, it is an essential part of the meaningful connection, courage, love, belonging, and even happiness. What makes this talk particularly interesting is that Bren Brownie does not begin by presenting vulnerability as a motivational slogan. She approaches it through her research into human connection, empathy, shame, and the stories people tell about their lives. Her research journey eventually leads her to a conclusion that initially makes her uncomfortable herself. The people who experience the strongest sense of connection are often those who are willing to accept uncertainty, imperfection, and emotional exposure. And this is where the talk becomes much deeper than its title suggests. We normally associate vulnerability with weakness. We may think that admitting fear, uncertainty, failure, or emotional pain gives other people an opportunity to judge or hurt us. So we develop strategies to protect ourselves. We hide our imperfections, avoid difficult conversations, try to appear confident even when we are struggling, and sometimes build an image of ourselves that is very different from what we actually feel. Brown challenges their approach by asking us to consider the cost of constantly protecting ourselves. Our central argument is that genuine human connection requires us to be seen as we really are. If we only show people the polished, successful, confident version of ourselves, we may receive approval, but we may never experience genuine connection. Real relationships require a certain willingness to say, this is who I am, this is what I feel, I don't have everything figured out. One of the most powerful concepts in the talk is the relation between vulnerability and shame. Brown describes shame as the fear of disconnection, the fear that if people really knew us, they may decide that we are not worthy of acceptance. This fear can influence our behavior far more than we realize. We may compare ourselves with others, hide mistakes, seek approval, or constantly attempt to prove that we are good enough. And that idea is extremely relevant today. Social media has made this problem even more visible. We constantly see carefully selected photographs, achievements, promotions, successful business, perfect lifestyle, and apparently happy relationship. What we really don't see are the failures, doubts, disappointments, financial struggles, rejected applications, difficult conversations, and the moments of uncertainty behind those images. As a result, people can start comparing their complete reality with someone else's edited presentation. Brown's solution is not to stop caring about others or to reveal every private detail of our lives. Instead, she encourages a more authentic relationship with ourselves. Vulnerability means having the courage to be honest about uncertainty and imperfection when the situation and relationships justify it. That distinction is extremely important. Being vulnerable does not mean telling everyone everything. It does not mean abandoning boundaries. It does not mean constantly talking about our problems or using emotional openness as an excuse to avoid responsibility. Healthy vulnerability requires judgment. We need to know who has earned our trust, what are we comfortable sharing, and whether the relationship can handle that level of openness. Vulnerability without boundaries can become oversharing, while complete emotional defensiveness can prevent meaningful relationship. The real skill lies between somewhere between the two. Another important concept in the talk is the connection between vulnerability and joy. This may initially sound strange. We might assume that avoiding painful emotions would make us happier, but Brown argues that we try to numb difficult emotions. We can reduce our capacity to, which can reduce our capacity to experience positive emotions fully. If we constantly protect ourselves from disappointment, we may also protect ourselves from excitement. If we avoid the possibility of rejection, we may also avoid intimacy. If we never take emotional risk, we may never experience the deeper reward that comes from genuine connection. This gives vulnerability a completely different meaning. Vulnerability is not simply about being emotionally exposed, it is about accepting uncertainty as part of being human. Think about ordinary life. Applying for a job is vulnerable because you might be rejected. Starting a business is vulnerable because it might fail. Expressing your feelings to someone is vulnerable because they may not feel the same way. Asking for help is vulnerable because you have to admit that you cannot do everything alone. But without taking that risk, many meaningful opportunities would never exist. This is where the talk connects vulnerability with courage. Courage does not mean that fear disappears. Courage means moving forward even when the outcome is uncertain. And Brown's own presentation style strengthens this message. He combines research with personal storytelling and humor. Instead of delivering an academic lecture filled with technical terminologies, she shares her own discomfort, discoveries, and struggles. This makes a potentially complicated and psychological subject understandable to an ordinary audience. Her humor keeps the presentation engaged, while her personal stories make the research emotionally relatable. The delivery is also important because Browns is not presenting herself as someone who has completely solved vulnerability. In fact, part of the appeal is that she openly describes her own struggle with the conclusion emerging from her search. That makes the talk feel like a lecture from an expert and more like a researcher sharing a discovery that changed their own understanding of life. From a presentation perspective, this is one of the talk's greatest strengths. He establishes credibility through research, creates emotional connection through storytelling, and maintains audience attention through humor and self-awareness. The result is a presentation that feels intellectually meaningful without becoming overly academic. But I think there is an important lesson we should take from the talk without oversimplifying it. Vulnerability should not become another performance. We should not suddenly feel pressure to share our deepest emotions simply because vulnerability is considered courageous. Authenticity also means respecting our own boundaries. Sometimes courage means speaking openly. Sometimes courage means saying no. Sometimes it means asking for help. And sometimes it means keeping something private until we find someone we genuinely trust. So, is this talk worth watching today? Absolutely. Even though it was delivered more than a decade ago, its central idea remains highly relevant because the basic human need for connection has not changed. If anything, in an age of social media, digital communication, professional competition, and constant comparison, understanding authenticity and emotional connection may be even more important. The biggest idea I take from Brené Brown's talk is this: trying to appear perfect may protect us from judgment, but it can also prevent genuine connection. We don't have to expose every weakness to the world. We don't have to stop striving for improvement. And vulnerability does not mean weakness. Instead, it means accepting that being human involves uncertainty, imperfection, failure, emotion, and risk, and having the courage to remain authentic despite these realities. For me, this is what makes the power of vulnerability more than just a motivational TED talk. It challenges us to reconsider what strength actually looks like. Perhaps strength is not always about appearing vulnerable. Perhaps sometimes strength is having the courage to say, I don't know, I made a mistake, I need help, I'm afraid, or simply, this is who I am. And if vulnerability is the price of genuine connection, then learning to accept it may not make us weaker. It may actually make us more courageous, more authentic, and ultimately more human. At the same note, this is the end of the review session. Hope you enjoyed this review. Until next time, signing off. Allah Hafiz.